I want to thank all of you for being here. Having been to Ukraine twice last year and having had the privilege of overseeing the presidential elections, I'm just wondering, are we at a tipping point? Because many of us have been calling, and on a very strong bipartisan basis, for providing, the lethal support for Ukraine to defend itself, as well as economic assistance, as well as increased NATO support, additional sanctions. And at some point, it's really appalling to me. It's hard to express how I feel about it, because we've been in almost uniformity here in the Congress on this, on things that, we don't always agree on. So many things on this, we've sort of, on a bipartisan basis, thought this was the right thing to do. And I'm just worried, are we not at a critical moment where I feel like, and having listened to, I was at the Munich Security Conference, having listened to, for example, the Germans speak about their objections to providing lethal arms. And it's almost like I feel like that in some ways Ukraine is being written off. And I hate to be so cynical about it, but if we don't act soon, where's this going? Isn't there a huge urgency for this? I felt there was an urgency last May, but can you help us understand how urgent is this situation where you are, we've got Ukraine with the economic situation, and in addition, having to defend their territory?
I think we are at a critical point, and I think what will happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks, maybe the next 2 to 4 months, is going to be another bite out of Ukraine by the separatists. I am hopeful that that will be that tip that pushes us over to come in with not only the lethals, but really the entire package of things we've talked about today. As of yesterday, as I mentioned to the chairman, mortar and artillery fire at the villages outside of Mariupol. That's what you do first when you soften up for a land advance. We may be there now. We'll know more in the next couple of weeks. We've got to get going on this if we're going to have impact.
I just want to also follow up. One of the things that struck me about this whole thing, and just correct me if I'm wrong in my thinking, and it's really bothered me in terms of our own foreign policy from the beginning, and that's been the Budapest Memorandum. It seems to me that we're not stepping up to help provide this kind of assistance that we've talked about here, and we signed this agreement. As we look at, for example, even the context of Iran, other goals that we have of nuclear nonproliferation, does this not, in the big picture, undermine? I just still don't understand why other countries would want to give up their nuclear weapons when their territory is invaded, and yet we, our signature on that memorandum seems to mean nothing in this context. Are you worried about that in the big picture as we look at our larger foreign policy here?
Senator, I agree with you. I think there are two important issues at stake here in the violation of the Budapest Memorandum. I was a volunteer in Ukraine working in Kiev when that was signed. And I remember the impressions in Kiev intimately. It was celebrated in Ukraine as an affirmation of the West's commitment to its independence and its sovereignty. It was even seen as an affirmation of its attempts to become a fully European and integrated member of the European community of democracies, because they were giving something up that was recognized as kind of potentially very important to their own security, nuclear weapons. Now, 25, 30 years later, we're in a situation in which that memorandum has been blatantly violated. And every country around the world that has or is aspiring to weapons of mass destruction is looking at it very carefully. What are the consequences if you give up such aspirations or such weapons? Well, you become more vulnerable. Will someone back you up? Not necessarily clear that they would. And then I think it's a real hit to the West's credibility, because it was really seen as a document driven by the United States and Great Britain, Europe and the United States. That's where the Ukrainians, back when I was there in 1994, were looking to for assurances, not to Russia, but to the United States and to Europe, and they're not getting it. and it's really undercut our standing, the credibility of our security commitments.
Senator, I agree with you, but if it doesn't loom large in my thinking, it's because it seems to me the case for supporting Ukraine is so strong.
Right. Well, it's compelling.
No matter what.
I mean, it's compelling.
Yeah. And I don't think we should in any way have the view that if there had been no Budapest Memorandum, we'd be less interested in this case, or that we'll be less interested in other cases where there isn't that same issue. You're right that the commitment of the United States has been shown to have been made perhaps without full thought as to what we really meant by it. But I think it's, to me, it's not the central issue. The broader question is the interest that we had in the entire order that we were trying to create in Europe after the Cold War. And this is the reason this fundamental threat to that interest has less to do with the disposition of Soviet nuclear forces. Truth is, the Ukrainians didn't really want to keep those things, and has much more to do with more fundamental considerations of war and peace and our future relations with Russia.
Well, I hope, I know my time is up, but I know how dedicated the chairman has been to this issue and how passionate he is, and I share his passion for this. And I hope that the administration and is listening to the testimony of all of you today. Thank you.